I read something that at one point you were calculating whether or not it made sense to get an airplane, fill the airplane
Yeah,
with people, and fly to buy all the Bitcoin in person. But it sounds like you
yeah,
didn't do that. But so what happened here?
we didn't. So, I mean, what you want to do is go buy Bitcoin, send it to Japan, sell it for yen, turn that to dollars, send it back, and then you just start hitting all these roadblocks. Like,
What they think it's money laundering or something like that, right?
right, exactly. That's
Yeah.
where it's going. Is that like the actual place is going? Like, actually, every single day, I would like to send like $5 million in the same direction from one currency to another one. This is the sketchiest fucking thing I've ever seen, right? Like, in order to get a banking license, you have to like take a test. And it's like if someone does exactly this, what are they doing? And you circle money laundering, right?
All right, you're about to listen to one of the craziest episodes we've recorded yet. It's with Sam Bankman-Fried. About an hour into the show, I asked Sam what time it was, and he said 3:30 in the morning. So the guy's a nut. He doesn't sleep. He's also got a net worth of $10 billion, so he's doing all right. He's like 28 years old. We talked about why they just acquired the naming rights to the Miami Heat Stadium, why they acquired Blockfolio, how he thinks about marketing, how he runs three different companies at one time: Alameda, Serum, and FTX. His plans for acquisitions in the future, what's next for all of his companies. He talks about his Japanese arbitrage trade that got him into crypto, the early days of Alameda and what that was like, and a whole lot more. Before we jump in, if you haven't reviewed the podcast, we're trying to get this thing to 100 reviews on Apple. So if you listen on Apple, head over to the review section, give it 5 stars. Let me know what you think. All right, let's jump in. Sam, it is so nice to have you here. You've been one of the most requested guests, so thanks for coming on, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I want to just set the stage, right? So you run Alameda, you run FTX, and you run Serum. I know you've got a bunch of other folks who help you out with that, but you've got three companies going
Yep.
on. You just bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat for 135 mil. You're one of Joe Biden's biggest donors. You bought Blockfolio last year for 150 million. How much sleep did you get this past weekend?
Um, I got some last night. That was nice.
It,
Um,
is some like 4 hours or 7 hours? What are we talking about
I
these
think it
days?
may have been seven. It's a good night. I didn't get much the nights before. I mean, the Miami Dade hearing and then just everything else sort of continuing to go on in the background. Hired some people, which is exciting, but just sort of there's a constant stream of things that are always grabbing for attention. And one of the more brutal parts, I guess, is the combination of crypto is obviously 24/7, with the fact that I just have to take calls with a lot of people, and many of them are Eastern Hemisphere, many are Western, and so those also sort of span a lot of the hours.
Yeah. When you sleep, are you how many nights a week are you sleeping in the office on the famous beanbag, and how often are you going
Yeah,
home?
it's probably a good solid 4 or 5.
Nice. I like it. So, Sam, we're going to talk about a bunch. People sent in over 100 questions, so which
Cool.
does not usually happen. So, we're not going to get to all 100, but we're going to talk about the Miami Heat. We're going to talk about FTX, Alameda. I know you've shared the arbitrage story a lot, but I'm going to ask you about it. But actually,
Yep.
I want to go all the way back. I listened to a bunch of podcasts that you went on, a bunch of interviews, and actually something that a lot of people didn't touch on that I was curious about is just childhood Sam, right? I think you're
Yep.
28 years old now or 29. What was 12-year-old Sam Bankman-Fried like?
Yeah, I mean, it's like 12-year-old Sim was, I think, in some senses kind of boring. Maybe bored and boring, sort of a little bit of both. I wasn't sort of like really into kid things, but you're also in a position where you're not really able to kind of like hang out with the grown-ups, so to speak. It's just it was a weird in-between state for me and felt, uncomfortable. But outside of that, I think it's a really good upbringing and is, super nothing bad happened basically. And really got along with my family well and sort of a, you know, pretty nice upbringing in the Bay Area. But I didn't do that much. I actually kind of struggled. It's an interesting question. I frankly struggled to answer it because I struggled to even think about what I did. I can't add up to 24 hours in a day. It gets like, I mean, I guess I slept and went to school, but I maybe there's like a little bit of homework. I can't figure out what else happened, you know?
Yeah. When do you feel like A lot of people when they share your story go back to MIT, right, in the physics degree. When do you feel
Yep.
like kind of adult Sam emerged? Was it in high school or was it actually at MIT?
I think it's basically at MIT. I think like some pieces of it started to emerge maybe in high school, but I think they were kind of tentative, and I think it wasn't really until college that I sort of started to, learn how to live and like have, real friendships and have like um, people I was close to and think about what I want to do with my life. And, I think those are all things I only had sort of like little simulacrums of until then.
Yeah. How much did your parents and like growing up on Stanford's campus or near Stanford's campus influence you?
In some ways a lot, in some ways not that much. I think it's sort of like I don't think sort of had like there are a lot of ways in which it wasn't clear what kind of very direct impact it had, but I think that it set the tone in a lot of ways. I think that like, you know, you could probably trace back some parts of what I'm like to that. I don't know, it was there's very little tension, sort of,
Yeah.
in my upbringing, in my household, everyone's sort of happy with each other and I think it's sort of maybe non-confrontational in a sense, and generally somewhat chill in some, not in always, but in some ways. But I also think that, there's ambition there too, and I think, my parents were really concerned with, what impact they were having on the world and what they could do there. They've tried to do a lot of things with their life, which has been really kind of inspiring to watch. And so I think that a lot of things like that probably did, draw non-trivially on that.
Yeah. I saw your mom runs Mind the Gap, or she used to run it. I'm not sure if
Yep,
she still does it. Did that. One of the things I want to talk about is just charity and giving, and honestly, just something I think the community and the industry could probably get better at as a whole. Did she
yeah,
influence you? Did I know 8,000 hours had a big influence you, or
yep,
80,000, whatever it is? Um,
yep. Yeah, they all did, and I think that like in the end, I sort of like discovered effective altruism really when I was in college, and I think that's sort of when that part of me really grew out. But I think seeds of it were there for a while, and I think it's something that my parents were both really supportive of and excited about when it happened, and that sort of jived with how they had been thinking about things, if not as much about how they'd been, you know, I, if not as much about how they've been giving or things like that. And so I do think that it like was a lot of influence in terms of style on how I thought about things and how I saw the world, if not sort of necessarily directly in what I did.
yeah. You you talk about this philosophy of basically you wanted to go to Jane Street right after MIT and you wanted to go make a ton of money because you wanted to donate a lot of money, right? And to donate a lot of money,
Yep,
you have to go make a lot of money. Let's talk about the I don't want to get into the politics at all here. I don't think that's what we're here to do, but just
yep,
the Biden donation. I heard you talk about it. The reason you did it is because you felt like you could have an outsized impact on
yeah,
basically the campaign, if I understand that
yep,
correctly. What can you
yeah,
go into that just thinking?
yeah, totally. So I think that there's like, the meme here, the thing that everyone says is that there's, an absurdly large amount of money in politics, and that's just like, uh, you sort of hear that it's usually not said in a very quantitative way. It's usually said to sort of imply, whatever mass amounts of corruption or something like that. Um, but definitely, the takeaway that you would get if you sort of just took that, kind of sentiment at face value is that like there would be so much flowing through all of these things that like nothing anyone could do would really have much impact on it. That there's like 13 quadrillion dollars being donated to everything, and there's like 52 lobbyists for every bill or whatever. You sort of like would assume sort of like such large numbers that like anything that on the scale of like one person could actually do would just not affect anything. And I think that just doesn't turn out to be true. And it's pretty surprising that it's not true because when you think about how much impact something like the presidency can have on the world, I mean, whatever you think about it, whoever you think would be good or bad at it, it clearly matters. Like, and if you want ballpark how much it matters, like, I mean, obviously, I'm not saying this is the way in which it matters, but you could look at like the budget, and like how much impact does the president have on the budget? What fraction of that is sort of determined by them? And well, that's like obviously a super rough way of thinking about it, but I think it starts to get at like what order of magnitude are we talking about, you know? And it's big. I mean, it's, I think we're up to like $20 trillion over a term or something like that. If you're thinking about like 10, a few $1 trillion then as sort of, maybe an order of magnitude estimate of how much a presidency matters, then, think about a campaign, right? Like a presidential campaign. How much is spent? Do you know what the number is?
I'd say about a billion.
Yeah, that's the right order of magnitude. It's actually grown a fair bit in the last few cycles, but it's still, maybe it's a few billion. And so just like to start off with, I mean, you're talking about like, spending the world together is spending a few billion on something that's going to determine in like a few trillion, you know? And already you sort of have this factor of 1,000 there, which is a pretty big difference that $1 billion are having $1 trillion worth of impact, right? Whatever that means. Obviously, I'm being super vague about a lot of this because I mean, who the hell knows is really the answer.
Well, what I was gonna ask is like the effect of altruism, right? My understanding of it
Right.
is you donate and give money to things that have are kind of lower hanging fruit, right? And where you can make a
Yep.
huge impact, right? So you wouldn't donate to Harvard, for example. You would
Right.
donate to, something like in low hanging fruit in Africa, right?
Anti-malaria foundation,
Anti-malaria.
something. Yeah.
But a lot of that is dependent on being able to track these things, right? So how do you
Yep.
track if you give $5 million to I forget it was like Dustin Moskowitz's thing. I forget what the Future
Yeah. A
Forward.
future for it is. Yeah.
How do you track? Okay, 5 million bucks. They probably put that into like Facebook and Instagram ads. Like, how are you
Right.
tracking the success of that?
So it's a good question, and not surprisingly, for a lot of history, the answer has been not just you can't track it, but I mean, it's much worse than that. It's sort of like what you would worry that would imply, you know, which is that like not only can you not track it, but like even if you sit down and have them describe to you what it did, it's often just like really hard to figure out how that had any impact. And it's true of a lot of where money in politics goes. That like you trace it through, and you're like, okay, where did this money go? And like after like 3 hours of trying to figure out, what it was doing, you're like, oh, I see. Here's like a long-standing senator who has a lot of political impact, and like this money went to fund their reelection campaign, even though they are 99% to win, because the person running this owed them a favor.
Yeah,
And yeah, it's not so much I'd say it's doing like actively evil, so much as just like sort of, I mean, doing nothing, more so than anything else. And so one thing you can do is you can run RCTs. If what you're trying to do is something like make it, remove barriers for people being able to vote, improving polling station access or something like that. You can look at, impact on votes cast in that district. And so post hoc, you actually often can sort of like do some general studies on these. What impact does it have? None of this is perfect, but you can do RCTs like that, and they have, they really do mean something. And so I think that that's sort of like the first answer to the question is, well, eventually you kind of want to do an RCT. The same thing you do with anything else. And what you'll find is, that there sort of isn't some weird trick here. It's like, the impact of these things is actually kind of on the same level as what you would expect given the quantities involved, that like a few $1 billion has like something like 100% swing in election probability or and whatever. I'm sort of just going for orders of magnitude here. But I think that is, often how it sort of works out.
yeah. When they're kind of like, let's look at three of the wealthiest Americans of all time: Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos, Carnegie, and Rockefeller. Right?
Yeah.
Of two very different ways of giving. Right? Someone like Rockefeller, he's very religious, and he gave money from the second he ever made a dollar, he would give 30% of that dollar away. Right? And
Yep.
he was always giving a lot of money away, and not only that, he didn't always smack his name on things. Whereas if you look at someone like Carnegie or someone like in modern day times Jeff
Yep.
Bezos, they their mindset is, look, it doesn't make sense for me to donate right now because I can compound a dollar and it'll have more of an impact later on in my life than
Right.
it will now. Is there a right or a wrong way to think about that? Are one of those people right and one's wrong?
So not necessarily. I don't think that there's necessarily a right and a wrong, and I think either could be. But what I'd say is like one of those is clearly going to do good. You know, like if you're donating as you're making money and you're donating to good places, that's sort of straightforwardly doing good. If your plan is to make a lot of money and not donate it and then compound it and compound it and compound it and then eventually donate, maybe that'll do good. But it doing good is sort of conditional on that donation, is at least conditional on that donation eventually coming and being good when it does. That whole argument falls apart if you're not sure you're actually going to do it in the end. And that is a real worry, I think. Especially given that, like, it's not clear how you enforce that someone's going to, other than that, like, they definitely said they would. What actual real signs do we have that makes us feel like they're going to follow through on this? And that they're going to follow through sort of faithfully, and that they're really going to try hard to do the best they can for the world. And I think just as importantly that, if one of the things you're doing is waiting, I think that gives you the opportunity, but at the same time, sort of the responsibility to stay on the lookout for exceptionally good opportunities and give if they come up,
Yeah.
you know? And are they actually going to do that? Or is this all just sort of an excuse? And if they're actually going to do it, I think it can be great. I don't even know if it's worse. Maybe it's better. There are reasonable arguments for it, but there's also reasonable skepticism towards a lot of people doing it. And so I think the big thing I'd say is just like, is there real evidence that they're going to follow through here? I'm not sure when I'm going to give, and I think it may be spread out over time. There's at least going to be a fair bit of building up. I mean, right now, for instance, it's not the right time for me to give the bulk of it because I mean, businesses are still compounding quite quickly. But I think it's really important that I at least give some each year and that I think hard about where I'm going to give and try and stay up to date so I can prove, I mean, to the world, but just as importantly to myself,
Yeah.
that this isn't bullshit, that I really do mean it. And that's the big thing that I'd be looking for is really credible, expensive signaling that, this isn't just a thing they're saying.
Yeah. How much, if you don't mind me asking, how much did you donate last year?
I think it was, I mean, I think it was like, you know, 8 or 10 total,
Yeah.
roughly. So it's, it's something it's not hopefully going to be the biggest that I do. But at least, it's something to try and keep me honest
Yeah.
and just as much keep me engaged and committed and thinking about it.
Totally. All right, let's get past some of that stuff. We're gonna jump into crypto, but I have one question about your time at Jane Street, which is,
Yeah.
from my understanding, you were on a webinar with us. I think it was a few months ago with like the LMAX CEO and a few other folks,
Yep.
and you mentioned your time at Jane Street. I think you were trading international ETFs, and
Yep.
from my knowledge about international ETFs, they are one of the messier things on Wall Street. Um,
Absolutely.
so can you just like my knowledge kind of stops there. I just know they're really
Yeah.
messy. Why are they so messy? And like,
Yeah,
and then my
totally.
second question is going to be, what are some things about international stock markets that maybe Americans don't understand? So either or. I don't know
Yeah.
if they're even related, but
There are, and there's sort of two reasons that they're messy. So one reason that they're messy is time zones. So it's 2:30 p.m. on a Monday on the East Coast. And so right now, the New York Stock Exchange is open. International ETFs are trading. So these are US listed ETFs that have foreign companies. So those are all trading right now in New York. But Samsung itself, and in fact, all of the Korean companies are not trading right now. Because in Korea, it's like, I don't know, like 4 a.m. or something. I don't remember exactly what time zone they're in, but it's the middle of the night. And so you think of trading ETFs as doing arbitrage, like you buy the S&P 500 and then you sell SPY if that's the way the ARB sets up, or vice versa, right? That doesn't work if Apple isn't trading at the same time SPY is. Nissan doesn't trade when a Japanese ETF trades. And so to the extent you're thinking about doing arbitrage, well, you can only do one leg at a time. And there's often like zero overlap between when you can do the ETF leg
hmm,
and when you can do the stock leg. And so then you're left with this really imperfect arbitrage. And you have to think about, well, I don't know, you have to think about like what would these stocks be worth? Or when you're trading the stocks, what would the ETF be worth? And how do I know that, when I'm going to get the chance to trade the next leg of this, this trade I did is still going to look good. So that's one of the messy parts of it. Um, the other messy part is what you're hinting at, which is that foreign stock exchanges, well, they're all over the place, and some of them are very much like the New York Stock Exchange, and some of them are not. In some cases, sort of what you'd expect. The German Stock Exchange is not very weird. It's sort of like does about what you'd expect it would do, and as a consequence, trading a German ETF is in many ways not that dissimilar from trading a US ETF. But let's say you're trading a Nigerian ETF. Well, in order to trade the stocks, you need Nigerian naira, right? How do you get Nigerian naira? That doesn't turn out to be an easy question. You know, let's say that you're trading a Korean ETF even. Well, the Korean won is a restricted currency, so you can't just go out and buy it freely no matter what. You also can't trade the stocks freely no matter what. In fact, there are like various complicated jurisdictional restrictions on that. And here's a wacky part. Well, maybe it doesn't sound wacky in crypto, but how much certainty do you think people have on what Apple is worth right now? I think the answer is they know to within like a basis point, right? Because I don't know, it's just like trades super liquidly on US exchanges. If you want to ask what a Korean stock is worth during Korean hours or a Hong Kong stock during Hong Kong hours, they actually both have really significant taxes that they charge on every trade. So it turns out many countries have something like a 10 to 50 basis point tax on every trade that happens on their stock market.
So the country is taxing the exchange.
It's taxing, I mean, equivalently taxing the exchange which passes it on to users or
Yeah.
taxing the traders directly.
Hmm.
And you say what you'll about tax, but I think generally taxing net profit makes a lot more sense than taxing transaction volume. So that's another thing. Uh, you never know exactly what exchanges are going to do. Like, I don't know, sometimes they'll shut down stocks and be like, sorry, you can't trade this for next month. You're like, why? And they're like, I don't know, it seems kind of wacky. And just like, well, but I need it to create this ETF. They're like, sorry, no, you can't. Then you go to the ETF and you're like, yo, I'm trying to create your ETF. It's got this stock in it and they're not letting anyone trade it. What you do? And you're just like, oh, Jesus, we got to deal with that again. And then the ETFs come back tomorrow, it's like, give us $30. We're like, why $30? Like, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? It should be 20? And you're like, yeah, I want it to be 20. We're like, yeah, I think it's too low. It's gonna be 30. And so it moves a little bit more towards the Wild West. It's just like everything is more likely to be broken, more likely to be wide or inefficient or illiquid, more likely to just like have speed bumps you're not anticipating. The fees, I mean, I talked about like these quote unquote stamp taxes, but that's just one type of tax and fee. In some countries, you end up paying like a percent all told. Oh, here's another fun one. In some countries, a stock will pay a dividend. Then 3 months later, they'll tell you how big the dividend was. And so it's like, how much does stock drop by on dividend day? I don't know. We'll find out in a few months.
It's such a
So it's
mess.
just like, yeah, there's all these things that make it messy. And any one of them, if it were the only thing, you'd be like, yeah, whatever, you can adjust for that. But when you add like 20 of them together, all of a sudden you're like, oh God, like, the market is disagreeing with me by 5 basis points in this product. I have no idea why.
Yeah.
There's so many things I could be messing up. There's so many things the market could be messing up. There's so many things the ETF could be messing up or the stocks. I mean, it becomes a sort of like, combinatorial explosion. And that's really what makes it a messy space.
Yeah. All right. This is a good time to segue. So let's All right. So you're at Jane Street. A lot of people know the story, but again, a ton of people don't know the story. There was this, quote unquote kimchi premium, right? The price of a Bitcoin in the U.S. would trade oftentimes like 30% less than the price of a Bitcoin in
Yep.
Korea. Everybody had their eyes on that premium. It was really difficult though because you had to convert these, as you mentioned like 10 minutes ago, restricted Korean currency into dollars. That was really tough. So you went for a different arbitrage play, right? The
Yeah.
Japanese arbitrage play. What
Right.
I read something that at one point you were calculating whether or not it made sense to get an airplane, fill the airplane
Yeah.
with people, and fly to buy all the Bitcoin in person. But it sounds like you
Yeah.
didn't do that. But so what happened here?
We didn't. So yeah, I mean, basically, it's like you said. So, well, for current Bitcoins, we're 30% rich or so. And everyone really wanted to do that trade. I mean, so you buy Bitcoin, send it to Korea, sell it for won, and then you're sad. Because then you've remembered that the Korean won is a restricted currency, which means that you cannot freely move it about. So, like, the next step is you got to get that Korean won out of Korea and turn it into dollars, right? In order to kind of like start anew. Maybe you can't do that. In fact, you probably can't do that, at least not for big size. So, all right, what do you do then? You hope that like Bitcoin and Ethereum are trading at different premiums there, and then kind of like do a relative trade. You can, I don't know, go to Korea with a suitcase. A bit further south, there's Japan, and um, Japan was trading like a 10% premium or something, which is not as cool as the 30% premium, and it's trading about $1 billion today, which is not as cool as like the $5 billion today that Korean was trading. But 10% at $1 billion a day of volume is still pretty cool. It's still like absolutely totally fucking unheard of
Hmm.
in traditional finance. Like you just never see it,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, what you want to do is go buy Bitcoin, send it to Japan, sell it for yen, turn that to dollars, send it back, and repeat. And then you just start hitting all these roadblocks. Like this is late 2017, so like you create a Coinbase account, and like how long does it take for you to get KYC'd?
Weeks
And it's like
back
three
then.
months.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
months. Yeah.
Um, what are your withdrawal limits on Coinbase? It's like,
It was minuscule until
5,000.
you had to get like KYC AML, which took weeks in and of itself. Like,
Exactly, right? So
yeah.
you send the dollars and like shit, okay, gotta get AML. Then you sent it from like whatever your JP Morgan Chase account or something, and that gets shut down. So like, you send money to Coinbase. They're like, yeah, they're like, cool, your account's closed. You're like, why? They're like, I don't know, we don't really want to do with crypto. I don't know. And so now you gotta get a new bank account. But of course, at this point, you're starting to worry that what's gonna happen with that one? Is that one getting closed? The answer is yeah, probably. So okay, so you're playing whack-a-mole with these U.S. bank accounts, and you're trying to get increased withdrawal limits somehow on some U.S. exchange. You finally get that. So you wire in your dollars, you buy some Bitcoin, you send it out to your Japanese exchange account. Then you realize you can't withdraw yen unless you're Japanese. So you got to be Japanese, and you have to get your withdrawal limits raised there. And then finally, you get to the point where you can withdraw. You sell it for yen, you can withdraw the yen. Then you realize they'll only send it to a Japanese bank account. So now I don't know. You're like going looking for Japanese bank account, but also you're not. Well, you got to be Japanese again to get that. All right, so you're Japanese again. You get your Japanese bank account. You like send the yen there, and you're like, can we send this to the U.S.? They're like, no. Like, why not? They're like, no, you don't have an international bank account. Okay, so now you gotta go back and get like an internationally capable Japanese bank account. And then you're like, all right, can we send this to the U.S.? So like, what are we doing with it? And you're like, it's crypto trading. They're like, can you repeat that? They're like, yes, it's a remittance. And they're like, how much are you remitting? Will this be like more or less than $1,000? You're like, it's gonna be more than that. They're like, it's gonna be more or less than $10,000. You're like, yeah, it's gonna be more than that. They're like, I'm sorry, you cannot do more than that each day.
What they think it's money
And you're like,
laundering or something like that, right?
right, exactly. That's
Yeah.
where it's going. Is that like the actual place is going? You're like, actually, every single day, I would like to send like $5 million in the same direction from one
Yeah, they're like
currency
the
to
money's
another
not coming
one.
back, so it's definitely money laundering
It's
now.
only
Yeah.
going one way
Yeah.
to a different country, and it's a different entity. It's like this, like you, this is like this is the sketchiest fucking thing I've ever seen, right? Like these literally, they just have in order to get a banking license, you have to like take a test. And it's like if someone does exactly this, what are they doing? And you circle money laundering, right? Okay, also I don't speak Japanese, so and they don't speak English. So you hire a translator, and they're like trying to translate arbitrage, and this person's like, "What's arbitrage?" You're like, "Well, you know how sometimes you're doing trading on cryptocurrency exchanges," and they're like, "You're buying Bitcoin," and we're like, "We're not. Well, we're buying it, but also selling it." They're like, "Wait, which are you doing? Buying or selling?" Like both. And they're like, "Well, why are you sending this money?" And okay, and eventually try and explain it. They're like, "Oh, come on, this is too weird of a story." So then you hire a law firm to go talk with like the physical bank teller and the branch, and basically be like a professional, impressive person who says they're doing arbitrage. I guess like I still have no idea what you're talking about, but you're a lawyer. Is this legal? And the lawyer's like, yes, it's legal. And they're like, all right. And now there's no website for any of this. So you got to be there physically each day on
So
both ends in
wait,
the
wait,
U.S.
so you flew, so you're literally in Japan this whole time?
So we had different teams in both places. So we had a team of people who spent like 3 hours a day in a U.S. bank, and we had a different team of people who spent like 3 hours a day in a
And
Japanese
wait,
bank.
wait, and back up, Sam. Who's the we? Are these like Jane Street buddies? Are these college friends? Like,
This is post Jane Street. So this is when I started up Alameda, and this was like Alameda's first really big trade
but who'd you
was trying
start
to spin
Alameda
this up.
with? Like, who are these people?
A random selection. I mean, it was like people
Hmm.
I knew from I mean, high school, from college, from effective altruism, from I don't know, like a friend of theirs. Like it sort of like just grew sort of out from like people who knew people who were. We had like 50 interns coming in and out over the first few months. I mean, it's just like hordes of people, and we'd have like the team in the United States. So you get the money off the Japanese exchange, and then you had to use the website to turn it into dollars, but it would only do 100,000 US dollars at once. And it was like a minute long prompt that you had to click through. It's like many screens that loaded very slowly. The problem is that there's about an hour between when the wire transfer hit Coinbase and when we needed to wire out from Japan. And in that hour, we needed to buy Bitcoin, send it to, Japanese exchange, Bitfly or whatever, wait for the blockchain, sell it, withdraw it to the Japanese account, wait for that transfer, turn it into dollars, and then go wire it out. And so we had like 5 minutes by the time this is over, when we're at this like converting step, and it took a minute per $100,000. So we just all stopped what we were doing. We all broke out, got on our computers, started just like, clicking through.
So everybody during
And
this
like,
1 hour, everyone during this 1 hour is basically doing it.
that's right. And
And
eventually, like when we had like 1 minute left, we were like, all right, guys, it's time. Whatever it's at, no more. And then someone would call up, our team in Japan, be like, who had been basically like got in line, like got to the front, and they just like kept letting people pass them, but like keeping their spot in the queue for the bank teller. Then we call them like, all right, it's time, go. It's like this is the notional, and then he, walk up to the bank teller and say, all right, like send the wire transfer now, and they're like, to where, and like said all the details, and I like watched as I typed in like the reference, this like fucking reference numbers you have, everyone's like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
3Q7T, and like no, it's a G, not a T. I'm like, T, no, 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 you gotta cross that out. It's a G, not a T, and and then eventually, like hopefully, they submitted it before the cutoff, and because if they didn't, you lost 24 hours. That was sort of the trade, and I don't know, it took us a long time to scale up and get all the pieces, and we got them about a week before it went away. So a couple
Wow.
weeks maybe. So we got a couple weeks of it in, but
So day one so once you get all this whole thing set up, you've got every
yep.
intermediary. What day one that you run the arbitrage? How much money did you put in?
I mean, well, day one we did like $200. Like day one, we just like wanted to
Yeah.
test, go from start to finish and see what happened.
What about
And I think we basically
what about once you knew, like the end of week one or
right
something?
once we knew. So you might think you do it all once you know, and it's very tempting. And like, I have a very strong instinct that tells me just as much size as you can. Why the fuck are you still scaling up? You know it works. Just maximize this. Either
Yeah.
you think he's a good trader, or it's not. I've had to unlearn that instinct in some circumstances because the truth is everything breaks if you try and do it too big. Everything that you think works doesn't work if you stress it too much. And they might say you have no limits, they're lying. There are limits everywhere. They won't tell you what the limits are. And they may never have had a customer who broke them before.
Mm.
But your goal is to be the first. Like like literally send money from one bank account to another. If you send too big of a transfer, they're just gonna close down your accounts. And you're like, why? I sent more money to my bank account. It's not good for you. Get more interest. It's like it's too big. And like, what do you mean it's too big for what? Like, what what's that even mean? Like, that went above your limits. Like, my deposit limits. Like, yeah. Like, you didn't say we had to. Like, we didn't think you were gonna send like that much money. I'm like, well, I told you I was gonna send that much money. It's like, well, we didn't believe you. You know? But we did it, and then he shut you down. You're like, I don't still don't understand why you're shutting me down. And the answer is basically like they just don't even know what to do. It's like they're like, I'm sure we have to file some
They
regulatory
just
reports
throw
on
their
this.
hands up in the air and they're like, I don't want to deal with this. This is too much for me.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
I might get fired. I don't even know why, but I might get fired over
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And my bonus has nothing to do with the performance of this company. So why should I care? Like this customer is not going to make me money personally, but he might lose me my job if I screw
Yeah.
something up.
So by
And
the
so
end of this whole thing, like how many millions are you doing a day? Are we
yeah,
talking?
I think I mean, we did not have as much capital as we wanted. Also, like capital is a limiting factor, but I think we got up to 10 or so, 10 to 15 a day at the peak.
Well, was that
Um,
was that a little stressful?
and it was exciting. It was very exciting once it was working because it just worked.
Was that the first time in your life you realized, holy shit, I'm going to make some funny money here?
Yeah, that was so. About a month earlier, like we started to get some pretty compelling whiffs of it. We hadn't quite done it, but it started to become clear it was unlucky that we hadn't done it, and that like it was going to work eventually. I think like maybe the Litecoin trade on Coinbase or GDAX at the time. So you remember it was like late 2017.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was like
yeah.
a week
20.
or two.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't remember why it happened, but the US just went nuts over Litecoin.
There was like a
And
20% premium on GDAX at one point.
yeah,
Yeah.
there was. And so we sort of saw that and we're like, can we just do that? And we tried we hit GDAX withdrawal limits was what stopped us.
Hmm.
So we had like $10,000 a day. So it's like, all right, eventually all your money is just dollars on Coinbase waiting to be cycled out. And in steady state, you're only doing 10,000 a day. But it became clear all of a sudden that if like we'd managed to get our withdrawal limits raised before that week, it would have been an amazing week. And I think that was the point at which we're like, all right, we are pretty sure that that's just luck. That like it could have been the case that we got our limits raised before that week happened. like I think that's sort of the point at which I started to feel like, all right, we've never quite nailed a trade yet, but basically started to feel like I feel pretty convinced at this point that if we keep plugging away at this, we will.
Yeah. So now okay, so the trade goes away, but now you've got a bunch of money and you've got a bunch of smart people and you've got Alameda Research, who I heard this funny story. Someone told me that the name Alameda Research is because you needed a bank license and research is like the most safe thing that you can get.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like we knew banks were going to shut us down because this was before Silvergate didn't exist. Signature, there were not yet U.S. banks that were happy with crypto. Instead, there are just a lot that did not want to have to fucking think about it.
Yeah.
And we just knew that was going to be a thing. And that if we named our company like Shitcoin Day Traders Inc., like that they'd probably just reject us for the bank account, or whoever the teller would accept this. 'Cause, well, they don't care. But I mean, compliance just have a field day with that. But I mean, no one doesn't like research.
Totally. Everyone loves research. So, okay, so
Yeah.
now Alameda, we're a few years later, right? Alameda is basically, the Moby Dick of crypto whales, right? You guys are responsible for like, I don't know the real numbers, you know these, like 10% of what feels like crypto moving in the
Right.
markets at any one time. Which, this means you guys have the potential to move markets, cause liquidations. It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and you never want to be intentionally moving markets. You never want to be doing something because of the impact it will have. Basically, what you want to be doing is finding ways to provide liquidity, finding places where there's excess demand and not enough supply, and being there. And so, but not to sort of like intentionally cause movements, or anything like that.
There's this argument that market makers add value to the world by providing liquidity, right? And
Yep,
so you can have a positive impact on the world because if
yep.
you're a hedge fund, you make markets more efficient, you bring down prices when there are premiums. It, is this, do you buy this? Do you believe this? I know that technically you do that, but is that adding
Right.
value to the world?
So I believe it, but I mean that's without making a claim about how important it is, like about how big of an impact it has. Like it may be a small one, it may be a
Yeah.
very small one, and this is only describing sort of legitimate market making behavior. But yeah, I think the basic argument is something like, look, if you're doing arbitrage, that means there's too much demand in some place, which is why it's trading too high. Someone's getting ripped off because of that. And if you can get there and provide liquidity, you'll make the spreads lower, you'll get them a better fill, and you'll make market pricing more efficient everywhere. Fewer transaction costs, more accurate predictions of future prices. And so, to the extent that markets can help bring liquidity and information to the world, you're helping enhance both of those. Is like the outline of the argument, and I basically do buy it. Although, again, it's like sort of a second order effect. So that's not necessarily to say that it's like the most important thing for the world or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I was having the debate with a friend over whether or not short sellers, like hedge funds that only go short, are valuable or not valuable. And I was
Yep.
taking the argument against the value added to the world, and he was arguing for them being quite valuable because they, sniff out the bad players.
Yeah, I think the right prior is that they're valuable. Now, you
Yeah.
could maybe you study them, they're like, okay, but these guys in particular, these guys are fucking idiots, or these guys are like malicious or something.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say that they're like
It's a spectrum too.
necessarily valuable,
Yeah.
but I think the prior is that would be your guess.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into what everybody wants to know about, which is FTX, which Mike Novogratz asked him about. Asked him about FTX, and he said FTX is the most innovative exchange, not just crypto exchange in the world, but exchange, period, in the entire world. What's the backstory behind FTX? You've got Alameda. You guys are making stupid amounts of money. Why'd you guys go launch this thing?
So it was like late 2018, and I always wanted to start an exchange because they just seemed like really important products in the crypto ecosystem that were worth a lot, played a really big role, and were not necessarily even the hardest to build. Sort of that combined with just an extremely large amount of frustration with the current products. Some of this was almost a like, if you won't fucking fix your product, I will do it for you type thing. There's like two exchanges whose derivatives were together more than half of all crypto volume, and it was just a total mess. I mean, it's like $350 million of customer funds lost to like, improper liquidations that year. There was, I mean, impending lawsuits. There's matching engines that couldn't keep up. There's just this notion which crypto is still hasn't fully unlearned, although it's making progress, which is that you should have 500 different wallets within a single exchange. That like, if you want to trade Ethereum futures and then you want to trade Bitcoin futures, you gotta buy some ETH, then put it in your ETH wallet, then take it out, trade for Bitcoin, put it in your Bitcoin wallet. It's
Yep.
just like this useless mini game that like half your time is spent dealing with your collateral, and people are getting liquidated left and right because they forget about one of their wallets. Things weren't getting better, and eventually, like, look, it's just like at this point we just definitely can build a better product. Like, it's just like these like too egregious. But that still doesn't mean it would be a success. Um, because maybe it would never get any users. And if you founded a crypto derivatives exchange today and had a great product, my guess is you would never get any users. How many people do you get coming up to you begging you for another crypto derivatives exchange in this space?
Not
Like
many.
zero?
Yeah.
When was the last time you checked out? What is the like oldest or newest exchange that you've ever looked at seriously?
The newest exchange I've looked at is probably
Yeah,
that I've actually used is probably FTX actually.
yeah. And in fact, if you look at exchanges ranked by volume, FTX it's whatever number like 3 or 4 or something globally. Um, in order to get to an exchange newer than FTX, you need to go to like number 30 or 40 or
What, like
something.
FemX or something or
Yeah, I mean
yeah.
it's like you get to this tier where you're like not even sure they're real.
Yeah.
And they're really damning things. Not only are you not sure they're real, like the world's not sure they're real, and it's never bothered figuring out. It's just like doesn't no one even cares that much.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few things. First of all, people just got bored of caring about new exchanges. But second of all, I think like this base got a lot better.
Yeah.
Um, exchanges have gotten a ton better in the last 3 years, and because of that, there's just a lot less demand. So I think that like not only do you need to get customers, but there's a race, and I think like we were right at the end. I mean, I think, we founded spring 2019. For late 2019, I'm not sure anyone ever would have used FTX. Like, think it's possible we would have missed
So
our
you
window.
guys launched spring of 2019.
Yeah,
And when did you think about the idea of launching that? Like when did you seriously think about it?
late 2018.
Late
It
2018.
was late 2018 when we made the call to start building it out.
So take us from late 2018 to spring of 2019. Like how do you think about I think what would be fascinating is basically the build versus buy conversations. Do we go white label custodians? Do we white label a matching engine or do we build everything in house? What did you guys end up doing at the very beginning?
We felt pretty strongly that we were going to build everything. And the reason is partially that was our whole value prop was that we thought we could build a better product.
Yeah.
And so, that means we have to build it. Like that is sort of like a lot of the point of it. Um, but we actually had the opposite question of like, should we build a product that other people can white label? Like, should the goal of
Mm.
FTX be a back end that other exchanges can load up? And we talked to a lot of exchanges at the time about like, hey, like you don't have a derivatives exchange, all your friends do, don't you want one? Hey, we've got one. We had some serious conversations, nearly pulled the trigger on one or two. Um,
But why would you do that
uh,
then? Because you're basically eating into your own market share.
it's true. On the other hand, this was, I don't know, 2 years ago. I didn't we didn't really know anyone in crypto exactly. We knew
Yeah.
some players, like I sort of like knew like the employees of other exchanges, but I didn't know how to reach users, and I didn't know how to even start that. And is sort of like what you do on day one. You launch your exchange, and then I tweet. I didn't have followers. I mean, I don't know, if you email my mom, ask her if she wants to trade. Like, I mean, but it really was just like, what's even step one here to getting users? On the other hand, here are these products who have what, like 20 million users at the time, and those users are actively trading on the platform every day. And so we're sort of like, look, like it's just like a ton of value there, and them launching a great derivatives exchange, even if we only get half that or a third of that. And so that was sort of the thought behind it. Didn't really happen for complicated reasons, part of which was we ended up believing in ourselves more than we thought we would. frankly, part of it was the FTT pre-sale. I think that was the first time that people generally started believing that FTX might be successful. Um,
Was the FTT pre-sale?
yeah,
Hmm. When
yeah, and
because that helped because people you guys marketed it well. I know I mean you raised some money, which was always helpful. But
right,
like,
it was the signaling. It was just like what we took away from that was that other people thought this might be a success.
do you think they believed in you guys
And
because you had Alameda behind the
oh,
firm,
I think yeah,
right?
I think it's a lot of it was well that and also just that they like some of them knew the team. And and I think that was most of it. I don't think it was like a super sophisticated calculation at the time. But I think people are sort of like, look, like seems like they have a shot.
Yeah.
And I think that made us feel like we had a shot.
Yeah. So walk us through the Blockfolio acquisition because Ed Moncada has to be one of my favorite people in all of crypto. He's like I don't know your relationship. I'm assuming you're close, but like I don't
Yep.
know. He's just a great guy. And
Yeah, he's a
did,
really cool guy.
did they approach you? Did you approach them? I know there were some bankers involved like Spartan Group and Galaxy. Did you
Yep.
someone like approach someone else? What happened here?
So I basically like they were looking for a white label partner. They wanted to put trading into Blockfolio. I think they approached a number of people, including us. But I think that they sort of, you know, I think we were sort of the ones that they're most targeting with that. And then after a bit of that, they basically just sort of said like, it's that's cool and all, but like, should we be doing more? Like, should would you guys be interested in actually talking about like M&A? And I think like my immediate reaction is like, oh yeah, no, obviously that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like that seems like a thing that would fit. And so then we started talking about what an actual acquisition would look like and sort of work that out over the next couple months.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the trend of brands buying media companies and platforms that have users and basically distribution is
Yeah,
going to become a lot more popular. Like you just saw
completely agree.
in like the SaaS space. I don't know if you know these companies, but HubSpot just acquired this newsletter called The Hustle. Um, like Mailchimp, the email provider, acquired a company,
Yep,
a media company. Like I think it's going to become, and I think there are a few other deals that I know of that are going to go through in the coming months. That
completely agree.
you know, I think it's just going to become more
Yeah,
popular.
totally agree. And I think there's just this thing of like, you find some businesses which are just like, I would give anything for a big user base. And you find other ones where like, I have this massive user base, and for the life of me, like, I can't get. I know the monetization is a fucking grind, and like, it's not that there's none, but it's sort of like, really not getting that much, and it's a huge hassle, and it's just like an obvious sort of like pair.
Yeah. When you think about marketing, because we've talked to your marketing team, and I think we'll probably end up doing stuff in the future. But like, how do you think about marketing in terms of like, okay, if I can get like, do you know your customer acquisition cost down to the T? Like, are you like, oh, if I can get a big whale to start using FTX, I'll spend $100,000 to acquire them, or is it a little messier than that?
The problem is that not all customers are the same, and in fact, they're like different by orders of magnitude. And so like, sure, you could have a customer acquisition cost of like $2. We've ran campaigns at a customer acquisition cost of like 10 cents or 3 cents. Um, and they're super repeatable, super scalable. They did not take a lot of work. We just sit there doing those all day and build up like the world's biggest user base. Like I think we could have 100 million users if we really wanted. The problem is that none of them would ever ever actually trade our product, right? Like all you have to do is say like you get a free dollar for signing up here, and now you have a $1 customer acquisition cost. The problem is that those customers are not selected for having been interested in your product. They're selecting for wanting to make a free dollar. And and this is like really fundamental to campaigns that you can run in crypto, because so many of them are basically paying people to sign up. Um, that like sure you can do it, but like what are you actually buying yourself, Are you buying yourself users who are gonna be relevant at all? And the answer is often just no, you're not. And so where that leaves you is sort of like, just pure customer acquisition cost doesn't tell you much. You need to know which customers you're getting. There are different sorts of customers. You're going to use different products. We're going to have like different expertises for different ones. It's just sort of like all around quite disparate. And so what that means is that like you have to be just thinking a lot more specifically about what you're doing and what you're getting out of it and why you think it's good, especially when you're doing sort of more targeted campaigns. So anyway, that's sort of aside. I guess there are three lenses that I think about it through. One of which is basically just like, I don't know, like is this generically a good way of, whatever advertising or whatever it is. I don't know how to think about that, but I don't know. You can sort of use standard metrics. I think it's worth a bit, not a ton. A second is this sort of sense of like, should this make sense? Like, should we be the one advertising here, or should we be the one acquiring this business? And like, if you think the answer is yes, if you think that like it makes more sense for you to do it than the people currently doing it, then that's a compelling argument that like, I don't know, probably if the market clearing price is sufficient, then you should do it. You know, that's a second way. But there's also a third way, which I've been thinking about a lot more recently. If you look at like who has recruited like the most users to FTX, basically like people who have been sort of like customer support representatives or ambassadors, and it's not been the ambassadors with like the largest Twitter followings. That hasn't predicted it super well, which is sort of weird. So you would definitely think it would be, but it hasn't been. Instead, it's been ones that we'd never heard of, that no one had ever heard of, but they're great guys and they really care and they're excited to work with us and they want us to do well. They use the product, um, and it fucking shows. Like whenever they're trying to get people to use it, everyone can tell that they're authentic. Everyone can tell they actually sincerely really want them to use it and want it to go well.
Totally.
Um, anyway, I've been sort of like spending a lot of time just thinking about these effects and really trying to think about like, look, I'm sure there's lots of moderately good advertising campaigns we could run. Like, there's just no chance there aren't. And I think a lot of people on our team are doing good jobs with that. But, then you get to sort of like, what can you do to make a brand? I don't think the answers are obvious necessarily, but I do think that there's something there. And I think that like, you can have some predictions about like which things you can do would have a chance at having huge impact. And that's sort of a thing I'm thinking about too. It's just like not just trying to have some impact, but really trying to like, you know, what could what could be the thing that everyone thinks of, when they think of FTX if we do it, right? What
Yeah.
could be a thing that could get 20 million users, not just like 20,000. And I think, you're thinking bigger things, but I also think thinking bigger things isn't enough. And I think that like, obviously we sort of like bought the Miami Heat, stadium rights recently. Um, and I think that's sort of, I don't know, I've been really excited with a lot of parts of that, including how much attention that's got, you know? Like that's gotten more attention than anything we've ever done by a very large margin, and it hasn't even started yet. And I felt very differently about that than like a lot of similar sounding things. I think it has a lot of nice properties. I think it's a really exciting partnership in a way that like a lot of very similar things wouldn't be. I think that like there are a lot of teams that just like wouldn't have nearly that same impact. I think that there's, people keep talking about buying these little patches on like athletes' jerseys. Like everyone's trying to sell those nowadays. That's sort of the new hot shit. Like that you're talking to like a hip sports agent if they're trying to sell you on the idea of sponsoring the patches on their team's jerseys.
That's worthless.
Um,
Don't do that.
it's worth like
Yeah, it's
no
worth.
one like can you name any jerseys on any patches on any athlete's jerseys? Like no,
Yeah,
right? It's like no one cares about the 10th largest, like the 10th most visible brand of a team,
totally.
right?
So did the Miami Heat approach you, Sam, or did you approach them, or was there some agent here? Like when, how did this go down?
Yeah, so I mean, without going into sort of all the details, like I think at the beginning we were definitely the ones reaching out to people. I mean, certainly since that's happened, we have had just a very large number of people approach us. I mean, it's sort of like, half the professional sporting teams in North America.
I know someone who works high up at an NFL team, and he reached out. He said, "Hey, do you know the CEO of FTX? We want to get some naming rights going with them." I was like, "I'm pretty sure you can reach out to him directly. But I'm also pretty sure there's more than one person reaching out to him."
Oh yeah, everyone is. As soon as it started, I'm like, oh
Yeah,
wait, of course that was going to happen.
yeah, of course.
But I And the other things, you get the adverse selection when people reach out to you. Like when people are reaching out to you, you know it's going to be the patches on the jerseys because that's what they've got left to sell, and they're hoping someone goes for.
Totally. Yeah. That's really interesting. Well, I think it was a good play. Everyone loves Miami on Twitter, and you've got Francis Suarez, right? Who's not
Yeah,
Miami-Dade, but City of Miami. So
yeah. It's a really nice synergy, and it's so I'm pretty excited about it.
yeah.
And excited what's going to come there. But we've got a number of other things like that. I mean, we sponsored. We're a big sponsor of Dave Portnoy now. Um, on
Oh, with Blockfolio,
uh,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I'm also really excited to see how that rolls out
That was
because
genius. That was genius.
he's also someone who people really care about, and
Yeah.
people listen to, and I think that's big.
Totally.
I always sort of use this test internally of like, if I learned this person were driving a Tesla, would that make me more likely to buy a Tesla, or would I not care? It's like one of the things I ask myself with any naming deal.
I think it's a good proxy. Yeah. Do you flipping this around? Do you guys get acquisition offers a lot to acquire FTX?
We used to. I think that like we've gotten a number in our history. They've been dying down over time, basically because our sense is basically that like whenever people reach out to acquire us, their hope is that we're just going to sell way too cheap.
Yeah. Well,
Like
because the
that's
number
what
of
they're actually
people who can actually acquire FTX is probably diminishing quite quickly as
exactly. It's just
the
like
value, yeah, the enterprise value goes up.
exactly like very few people have like the actual cash on hand necessary to do that.
Have you ever gotten an
And
acquisition
so
offer from someone like a Bank of America or JP Morgan or someone like a more traditional firm?
we not really like we've gotten sort of like very brief kicking of the tires, but again, it's sort of like it got cut off in like stage 0.1 because basically just like quoted a number and they're like, oh yeah, no, not interested at that
Yep.
valuation. And again, I think like their hope was that they could. I mean, it's a reasonable thing for them to hope for. Also, it's just that like we just like quote way too low of a number.
Yeah. What's the value of FTX, do you think, right now?
It's a really interesting question, and obviously no one knows for sure. But I think you can sort of look at like you can look at comparables here, right? Like you can look at what Coinbase and Kraken and BitMEX and the various URL companies and I mean I don't know who knows, but I think 20 is sort of the ballpark that you get to.
Yeah. One of your traders, I forget his name. Shoot, I really like the guy, but he had a good thread about March 12th or March 13th.
Yep, and it's
Uh,
probably Trubico.
yeah, exactly. And one of the interesting things that I learned there, because I'm not a trader, right? He's like, this was really tough for us. We handled it well. A lot of people handled it well. What you guys don't realize on the outside is how much worse this could have gone, right? He's like, you
Yeah,
literally could have. He's like, you literally could have had Bitcoin going down to like $500 pretty quickly. And
yeah.
like, can you explain what happened on March 12th or 13th, what that day was like, and like how much worse it could have gone?
Yeah, it could have been a total fucking nightmare. I mean, and in particular, like the big thing is that you had these cascading liquidations, right? If it weren't for that, the risk would have been a lot lower because, frankly, no one who was holding lots of Bitcoin thought that it was worth. No one thought it was worth 3,500, but it did get that low. But everyone thought it was worth more than that. No one was like, "Oh yeah, no, you got to sell here. This is obviously like an overpriced Bitcoin." Even the people selling didn't think that because they didn't want to be selling. They were selling because they were getting liquidated. You know. And so I think it's one of these things where like was almost accidental that it printed up there, um, and or down there rather, and it just happened because someone gets liquidated, which triggers a liquidation of someone else, which triggers a liquidation of someone else, and eventually like, billions of dollars got liquidated. The scary thing about those is that it's not clear why they stop. It could just keep going, and the problem is that like when you're driving down to that sort of range, um, there are a lot of businesses and deals in crypto that were just premised on the assumption that Bitcoin would never go below 5K.
You know, like mining businesses, a lot of lenders. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And so there's just like a ton of other people who didn't have leveraged futures positions on, but who nonetheless had a basically an economic situation that was unsustainable below 5K. And what you worry is that you have like this sort of 2008 like situation where eventually it becomes clear that like it might cascade through the whole industry. That like almost nothing will be left. That was the real worry. And it was just like every $1,000 that Bitcoin went down, another chunk of the industry became unprofitable.
Hmm. So
Um,
so how far away were we from going from shit really hitting the fan?
I mean,
Are we talking
yeah,
hours,
not very far.
days? Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I, 6 hours, 12 hours, I don't know. Like,
crazy.
I mean, it's dropping pretty quickly at some points there. It wasn't like just slowly bleeding down. Like it went from like 9K to like 4K in about a day. So the answer can't be like, there's a limit to how long the answer to that can be, right? Like,
Yep.
'cause we just actually didn't take that long to get very close to it. Um, I think like in 1 hour it could have happened if it was a very bad hour, but each hour is not rated to be that hour. But if it had gone on for 6 to 12 hours, maybe one of them would have. It's not a whole lot of time.
Nuts. Um, do you think you'll run FTX and Alameda? And then we've got a third thing, Serum, which we haven't even talked about, which I don't think we'll have time for. But you can give a one-liner if you want to mention what it is, because there's a lot of investors listening. But like, do you think you'll run these three companies forever, or do you think eventually you'll put in CEOs in place? Like, what is Sam Bankman-Fried doing in 5 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, so Alameda, it's like already the case that I've taken a pretty big step back there, and am I'm not doing the day to day there, and am sort of you know excited it's been able to hire a bunch of great people. In terms of the other ones, I mean, I think there's nothing imminently there, and I think that like they're in a position where like I mean, I think I'm important to them, and I think that they're important, and I want them to do well. But I mean, FTX in particular, I don't foresee myself taking the gas off of anytime soon. Serum's an interesting one because it's a decentralized ecosystem, and so I like did a lot to help it boot up. But over time, a lot of the drive is getting more and more people to be working on it and pushing on it and building on it.
Yeah. Hmm. Do you think FTX will, like, right now? I think I'm assuming how you look at FTX is you're competing against like Coinbase and Binance and things like that, and the other exchanges.
Yep,
Do you think eventually it will be more? To back it up, you guys are now trading fractional stock offerings of things like Tesla and Apple and
yep,
Amazon and pre-IPO Coinbase. Do you guys see yourself competing eventually with New York Stock Exchange and Nasdaq?
that'd be pretty cool. Um, and I would be pretty sad if we never felt like a competitor to any stock exchanges. Although we'll see where it goes. Maybe it ends up being international stock exchanges. I don't know for sure, but part of our thesis of the future is like we're an exchange. We have exchange technology, and you can use exchange technology to exchange things. Actually, lots of things, not just cryptocurrencies. And we've built a matching engine and a risk engine, a liquidation engine, and a GUI, and just a mobile app, and API, and a brand, and customers, and you know, all of those things help out with whatever trading you're offering.
Yeah. Hmm. Let's we're gonna start to wind this down, Sam, so you can get a little sleep. Let's talk about health for a second.
Yep,
You are you still vegan and do you still not drink?
uh, both are true.
Nice.
I don't religiously not drink. I think I have like 2 drinks a year. I don't
Yeah.
know, something like that,
I think most
but
people
pretty
would call
close
that, yeah, not drinking.
to. Yep.
2 drinks a year. Yeah, I haven't been drinking for about 6 months. I feel much better than I did when I was drinking. All right, three kind of rapid fire questions here, and then
Yep.
you can ask me one question, and then you can hit the beanbag. Um, there's a lot of non-crypto folks actually listening to this podcast. Um,
Yep.
let's call it 28-year-olds who maybe work in finance, they work in banking, they work in tech, they're looking to break into crypto. A lot of them are entrepreneurial. What is the biggest opportunity for entrepreneurs who are looking at the crypto space right now?
Yeah. And there's a ton. It's often the case in sort of rapidly exploding areas. Um, I think the biggest things that I would say is, whatever, I'm gonna have some opinions on like specifically which projects or companies or whatever you should work for or have high upside or I think are gonna be the future or something like that. But everyone's got opinions on that, and I don't know. I mean, you can just Google what I think there, or listen to whatever their people think. I think what I would say more generally is like what I see is the thing that like can just bring huge value and you can get a lot of value from doing is not just from sort of generically, doing something or working on something important in crypto or something like that. It's basically like try hard, do a good job, and follow through to completion. And I think a lot of people they just like fail one of those tests, and it's like when sort of a market and an ecosystem is this good, um, you don't need to be shooting to have you don't necessarily need to have chosen literally the best possible idea in order for it to work. The bar is a lot lower than that. But what you do need to do is actually have a product and actually get it to launch, and actually like release things and try and get users. You're not going to get users if you never try. And you're, and so I think what I'd say above anything else is like, yeah, build something, have it be a reasonable thing, have it be something people have asked for, and actually finish it and drive it to completion. And that's going to be more important than what it is you're working on.
Hmm. What's the most controversial decision you've had to make at Alameda, or actually just in your career?
Oh boy. I mean, well, publicly or privately. I mean, behind the scenes, there's, when it's sort of first starting up Alameda, there's a huge number of things that were complete messes. And I didn't know how to manage exactly at that point, and ended up with like some people who were pissed off at each other and me, and I had to sort of resolve that. But in terms of sort of more publicly controversial things, I think like, I mean, it's a silly example, but like, when and how to expire the Trump contracts. I mean, that got a lot of that got pretty hot.
Yeah.
That is in hot water there.
Yeah, Twitter was fun.
I think at some point someone's asking for Trump March because Trump Feb wasn't giving enough time to see what would happen. I don't know. That's like one of them. I think there are a number of things that were not actively controversial, but people sort of like disagreed with at the time. I think like using USD instead of USDT as a base for FTX, having linear instead of inverse futures, having a cross margin instead of isolated margin. I don't know. I think in retrospect, I'm happy with most of those decisions. But
Yeah, cool. Well, we can finish if you want to ask me one question.
yeah, I mean, I guess like, what's your favorite and least favorite part of FTX?
Will preface this by saying I'm not a trader. So we work with a lot of traders, right? And we help a lot of
Yep.
exchanges acquire customers who are traders. So I know the space decently well, but I'm not a trader. I think my favorite part of FTX is how quickly you guys launch new products and how you guys capitalize on culture, which I think a lot of companies don't understand that aspect of marketing. I'm a marketer and a salesperson, right? And I'm not a product person, I'm not a
Yep.
trader. And so when I see companies that can move crazy quickly on product, I think it's cool. I respect it. I know how hard it is. When I see companies that move crazy quickly on marketing, I'm always blown away. And you guys
Yep.
do what I think 1 in 100 companies can do, which is you capture opportunity when culture changes, and that's really hard to do. Um, my least favorite part is I'm in New York, and I can't sign
Oh
up.
yeah,
I tried signing up
Fed
for
license. Yeah.
Blockfolio trading, and I got denied. So I could try to VPN in, or I could just play it by the rules. So that's you
Yeah.
guys got. I mean,
Um.
you and every other exchange needs a bit license.
Yeah, it's somewhere on the roadmap. Maybe not in the immediate one, but we'd love to get there. I don't know. Hopefully in the next couple of years. So
Yeah, cool. Sam, when are you gonna go to
yeah.
sleep tonight?
Oh geez. I mean, I've got some time from like 8:30 or 9 a.m. I think. I've got kind of back-to-back
You crack me up,
meetings
man.
until then.
All
So
right, well, nice work, good work. Sam, this has been awesome. This is one of my favorite episodes I've ever recorded. This will be out very soon, so I hope everybody enjoys it. And again, this was Sam Bankman-Fried of FTX, Alameda, and Serum. So Sam, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.